The book of Acts, chapter 17, starting at verse 16. Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, "What will this babbler say?" Others, "He seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection." And they took him, and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is? For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears, and we would know therefore what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which we were there spent their time in nothing else, but either to tell or to hear some new thing." Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, "You men of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious. For as I passed by, I beheld your devotions. I found an altar within this inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship. Him declare I unto you. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Neither is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things." This is Matt Singleton with Bible Smack Radio. Bible Smack blog, anyway. I've been considering this question for a little while now. Seen a lot of videos where they ask, "Is atheism a religion?" And I didn't know which particular video to respond to. I might put it on one, because I have seen several. But I think that this is a very interesting question. Number one, it is a trick question. And the reason it's a trick question is because atheism is a word that comes from a different type of category. It's a philosophical term. It's not a religious term. So when somebody says, well, atheism is not a religion, I agree. But the opposite, theism, is not a religion. Okay? I could argue philosophy and say I'm a theist. But that doesn't mean that's exactly who I am and what I worship. I worship Jehovah through his Son, Jesus Christ, who is the living God. The God who's in the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. But, so I don't even know if that's necessarily the right thing to say in terms of religion. But is there any, religious body to those who qualify as atheists? Many religious bodies, in fact. And so a lot of them, they try to categorize things and they try to say, well, how are we a religion? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I understand that there is many different denominations and many different types of religion. And so they try to hide behind this. And they hide behind this because they don't believe in the concept of truth. So they don't believe in truth, and it's not really a great moral value to them. And if it's not a great moral value to them, then they don't really want to be honest and say, okay, this is the way I am. For instance, there is an official religion. I think it's recognized by the United Nations. It's called humanism. It's official. It is a religion. I'm not necessarily saying that every, single person who says atheist fits into that religion, but there are many people, and I would put, as far as like the word to put over this camp, I would put modernism. Okay? Now, there's modernism put in a big way and a small way. The modernist, they have philosophies like modernism and postmodernism. But postmodernism is still modernism. Why is it still modernism? Because if you didn't have modernism, you wouldn't be post. Okay? And there's also other religions. New Age. New is modern. It all kind of comes, it all stems out from here. 3 prophets, I think, of modernism that you would look at these 3, and if you combine these 3, and they're easy to combine, would really make a pretty thorough religion. And that is Darwin, Sigmund Freud, and Karl Marx. Okay, you got those 3, you've got a religion. You have an understanding of humanity, you have an understanding of the cosmos and the universe, you have an understanding of morality. Now, you could throw in a couple other guys. You could throw in Immanuel Kant, just to make sure you got your epistemology down. You could throw in David Hume. Really, if you want a central figure, you really need to look at Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche really kind of encompasses between those big 3 major prophets. Okay? And a lot of people, you might be getting ticked off now because I'm using the word prophet. But, the ancient pagans would recognize that their prophets were their poets. The truth is coming out of the message of these men. And that if you have this understanding, if you're modern and a modernist, these are your 3 big ones. But in Nietzsche, what you find is the most religious of all the guys. He talks about a will to power and a will to truth. That life is all there is. And so we have to live for today because tomorrow we die. We don't have an afterlife. So he begins to hate Christianity, and before that the idea of Platonism, because that points to a spiritual reality. See, there is no reality other than life. And so the values and the morals of Christianity he is in opposition to, because they are focused on a heavenly reward system. He'd say, look, we're not focused on the will to truth. Okay? We're not focused, and that's his words, he's not focused on the will to truth. He says it's about the will to power. And the will to power is someone who can change the truth at any time. They can just roll with it and become a chameleon and just do everything they can to get to the top. Their life is always strife, and struggle, and hatred, and violence. And, you look at Freud, and there's a significance on selfishness, that humanity is driven by the ego. And all that comes out of Darwinian naturalism and all that theory. So it's all connected down. You got the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, and with them, the modernists, you really have Darwin, and then you have Marx, and then you have our buddy Freud. And then when we go into Marx, you have your eschatology, this utopian society that this is what we can create. And what about heaven and hell? Well, heaven is future. That's why everything's about being new, about being modern. Everything's going to get better. Everything's going to evolve to this higher state. And everything in the past was just vile and ugly. And you don't really want to look at history. It's detestable. You don't learn from the past. You got to look to the future. So with modernism, it all kind of has that effect. And it doesn't matter if you are openly worshiping other gods as a New Ager, or if you're just worshiping yourself as an atheist. Is there any faith Yeah, there has to be a faith. And not only is it in one thing, it's in everything. They have to have faith in everything. Because everything changes and everything dies. So, how do you account for what's eternal? And you'd say, well, we don't have an eternal because we don't have a God. Okay. But what did you have before that? We'll go back to the Big Bang. What did you have before that? Oh, well, we had aliens or a universe or something. That's perfectly just religious, not scientific at all. Because there's no observation. You didn't observe anything. And what did you have before that? And before that? And before that? Well, you have infinity. What is infinity? You say, well, infinity is the material that we live in. But the material that we live in is changing, so it cannot be permanent. So you have an ultimate contradiction there. And say, well, we exist according to laws of reason, and we in empirical data that we learn. Where did the laws of reason and where did the laws of logic, where did the laws of science come from? How do we know? How do we know that this stuff is able for us to understand? How do you know that your brain isn't just a bunch of chemicals that fall apart? You know, are you crazy? So there's faith in everything. And what happens if you don't have faith in everything? Well, you're crazy. So we have to go to the priesthood. And the priesthood goes back to Freud, psychiatry. And if you are not living according to their logic, then ultimately, you know, you're not fitting the system. You know, we worried about the Inquisition with Roman Catholicism, but many times the psychiatric wards in the past have done criminal things themselves. You start talking about electroshock therapy. And even the modernists before that, the ancient modernists used to get into bloodletting. Oh, we just got to squeeze them for their blood. You see, psychiatry is that new priesthood. So how do I get out of it? Well, the problem is my genes. It's my flesh. I'm just not evolved enough. So how can I do that? I have to change my being. How do I do that? Well, take dope. So we have drugs. And Freud was a dope doer. So, you know, now we get into this addiction, this drug addiction, and all that kind of stuff. But also, where do I put my faith? Well, I put my faith in me, humanism, existentialism. I determine who and what I am and what I'm going to be. But does everybody accomplish that? And if you don't accomplish that, how do you know that you determine who and what you are? Couldn't it be just all mass of genetics? Could it be that you have no free will at all? And if you have no free will at all, then what's the point of anything? And you say, well, the point is the will to power. The point is getting ahead on my own. And it's like, if it's really that big of a point, then why is it going to go away? You know, Nietzsche lived out that philosophy and he died in an insane asylum. Hitler emulated Nietzsche. And the Nazis loved Nietzsche, whether or not Nietzsche approved of them or not. And what happened to them? Hitler didn't die poor, but he died. It's done and gone. That's faith. You know, what about worship services? What kind of worship services the modernists have? Well, there are some that are specific. You have your environmentalism. We've even got a holiday called Earth Day. You have, you know, those who are focused on different types of technology and all that kind of stuff, and they're thinking that's going to show them the way. But really, it goes back to humanism, goes back to self. Is there a selfish religion? Yeah, entertainment. Whether you're finding that at the Holy Super Bowl, or if you're finding that at the latest rock or rap concert, it's worship. It's just that you're worshiping yourself. And the thing is that you can say, I believe in life, but if life goes away, what is there to believe in when you're dead? Every man's going to have to give an account to God, whether he acknowledges them or not.